Welcome back, guys. I'm Zell. I appreciate you stopping by. And today we have a Byrd Raven 2. It's kind of a sweet little knife from Byrd. And we'll talk more about it in a minute. But first off, why don't you come on in here a little closer? We'll get a look at it. Alright, guys, getting a closer look at the Byrd Raven 2. We have G10 handle scales and all torque screw construction on this side, and we can see our Byrd Comet hole. We rolled around to the back. It's full flow through, has some really nicely cut pillars in here. You know, as we can see, those pillars are cut very nicely. They're a little fancier than what comes on the Spyderco knives that are similar size, such as the Tenacious. As we move on along to the other side, we can see we have a standard kind of a satin Spyderco pocket clip, 4-way positionable, of course. Rolling up to the top, we can see that the blade's not perfectly centered, and I have fought with this thing, tried every trick I know besides changing out the bushings, and that's just what we're going to get. Quickly going through the closed numbers, we have a total length of 4.5 inches, a thickness of 0.46, and a height of 1.56. So in Spyderco tradition, it's kind of tall, but it rides pretty well in the pocket. Whenever we get it open, we have a total open length of 7 7/8, a blade length of 3.5 inches, and an edge length of 2 7/8. Part of that's taken up by your forward finger choil here. And now that we've got it open, we can see that our handle design is kind of reminiscent of some of the higher end Spydercos. We have a deeper finger choil here and a bit more of a kick up in the back. Makes for a thinner handle. Whenever we look at the blade, we have the kind of a standard Spyderco semi-drop point, semi-leaf style design. In this case, we have a fair portion of it taken up with this forward finger choil, which, again, in this case, I'm okay with, because it does lead to better handling of the knife, or more options to get your hand around it at the very least. And we can also see Sal's maker mark here, Sal Glesher's mark. Whenever we get the knife in a standard grip, it's okay. It's not great because the jimping up the spine of this knife is nowhere near Spyderco jimping. It is basically just some bumps on the back of that thumb ramp. It's not grippy at all. And that is kind of an annoyance here. I've gotten used to the very grippy Spyderco thumb ramps, and I kind of like them. And the other issue is right in here. And it's going to be hard to really explain this, but where this lock bar comes up and the way Spyderco has left it kind of sharp right here, it digs in to the fat of my index finger right here, and that is very uncomfortable. Now, if you go ahead and choke up on it, that eliminates that problem, does not eliminate the thumb ramp problem. Ergonomics overall are pretty good, and whenever you consider what you're paying for the knife, I'm not going to say they're above average, but we're going to go with right around average, maybe a little better, but some things could have been paid more attention to. Now, overall build quality, you can see down in there, the liners are skeletonized. We do have these nice pillars in here, and everything is built well. It's on par build quality wise with the Tenacious and that line of knives. I have some issues with the hardware, so I'm not going to say it's built to Spyderco quality. And all the mess I did trying to get this blade centered, these little screws are T6 Torx, and they are soft. They are not what I would expect to find on a Spyderco knife. Even the Tenacious has much better screws with a higher hardness. I have one of them that has kind of started to strip out on me. If you mess with knives that have any Torx hardware on them, you know that especially the T6 Torx, even very, very good T6 Torx, you end up stripping out the driver long before you ever strip out any screws on a knife. You know, I've got several T6 over here that have been twisted or completely stripped out from trying to take apart a factory tightened knife. So that's a bit worrisome to me, the softness of these screws. However, if you take that away, the rest of the knife is built very, very nicely. One other thing to note, if you are a Spidey flipper, you like to open your knife like that or like that, this knife is put together with nylon bushings instead of the phosphor bronze that are in the Tenacious and its brethren. It's not that big a deal, but it is noticeably less smooth than those knives. Now, we should get to the star of the show here. You can see that where it says Byrd CTS BD1. Now, BD1 steel, by all accounts, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, is not the greatest steel in the world, but it is better than 8CR13 MOV, and I've done some cut testing between the BD1 and the 8CR13 MOV, and I agree. In my opinion, the CTS BD1 is considerably better than the 8CR13 MOV and the Tenacious and its brothers and sisters. Another thing they have done here is our blade stock thickness is 0.15, and it's up from 0.12. Doesn't sound like a lot, but let's get a Tenacious out here and we'll look at that. We have the Tenacious on the left at 0.12 and the Raven 2 on the right at 0.15. It's a pretty significant difference. And the last metric we're going to consider is weight. It's at 4.15 ounces, so it's not a lightweight by any means, but it's not a heavyweight either. However, we do have to consider that we're at 2 7/8 of an inch on our actual edge length and a blade of 3.5 inches. 4.15 ounces for a blade of 3.5 inches, if we had more cutting edge, wouldn't be leading the pack, I don't think, but it'd be quite a ways up there. Be pretty light for that length. But whenever we're talking about an edge length of 2 7/8 inches, we're getting a little chubby, but we're getting a heavier duty knife. We talked about the standard grip hot spots. As you get it around in your other grips, those hot spots don't show up and everything works pretty darn well. As far as opening mechanisms go, it does fairly well with a bit of a wrist flick. If you want to flick it open, of course, you stick your finger in the spotty hole and roll it open. That's what it's designed for. Works just fine. You can spidey flick it, and doing a spidey flick with your middle finger definitely works better than flicking it with your thumb. And of course, just like all Spydercos, it does a pretty darn good job of being ambidextrous. Well, what do you think, guys? Byrd Raven 2. I kind of like it. I was never a monster fan of the Tenacious, and we'll get into that in another video whenever we pit the Tenacious up against this one. But this knife I could be a fan of. And if you notice there, it is definitely flicking a lot better. I know in the video that I said that I never got this thing to center. Well, here's something you guys may not know. The center parts of these videos, whenever we do the camera down view, sometimes, okay, not sometimes, most of the time, those get recorded early on whenever a knife shows up. Reason for that is in case I do something to damage the knife or blemish it, we don't have that in the camera down view. I want the knives, even though I'm not getting paid by any manufacturers, I want the knives to look good whenever we're looking close in at them. And on this knife, just a few days ago, I was carrying it and had a few minutes and I was frustrated over that slight bit of off center. So I disassembled the knife and just cleaned everything up. And I had never oiled this knife because Spyderco had, Byrd had sent it oiled. And what I found whenever I got the knife completely apart was a lot of gunk. And it wasn't residue from sharpening. I'm not sure what the gunk was. It was kind of a green, nasty color. So I cleaned all of that out of there and reassembled the knife. The only thing I did in the reassembly of the knife was made sure that the smooth side of those nylon washers were up against the blade. They're nylon, I didn't try to smooth them off or clean them up. You know, they were holding their shape, so they're better washers than some of them we've seen. But that's all I did. And then I reassembled the knife just like I'd reassemble any liner lock. And whenever I got done, the blade was centered up. You know, there it is. It's perfectly right down the center. And I put a little ballistol in it, very small amount, just enough to get those little bushings wet, and it's a whole new knife. However, we do need to talk about this knife and it being a Byrd knife. We're getting good steel. The BD1, as you'll see whenever we put them up against each other, is some pretty decent stuff. However, we're stepping up in price to a little over $40. And we're giving up the Spyderco warranty or whatever other brand, because you know, in Kershaw's stuff, once you get up past $40, you're getting into some of their USA made stuff, and most of that stuff is great. For me, it would come down to this: if I were going to buy a Byrd knife that cost $30 or $40 and it was going to be my everyday carry knife, I would want to go to the store, put my hands on it, look at it, make sure the blade's centered, make sure the action works right. Do all of those things before laying my money on the table. Now, if you can do that, if you have a place that sells the Byrd knives and you can do that and you can get this knife in that $40 range, and you know, at that, you know, you may have to give a little more to buy it in the brick and mortar store, but I think it would be worth the extra $5, $6, $7 to do that because of Byrd's fairly limited warranty. Now, I have carried this knife and it carries pretty darn well. Carries very similarly to a Tenacious. However, the one major bonus here is whenever you undo this liner lock, because you have a forward finger choil, it would be really, really hard to cut yourself. It gives you that indication, just like a flipper does, that it's time to get your thumb the heck out the way and go ahead and close the blade. And, you know, you're giving up some blade length, but I think the return there is pretty good. Plus, that forward finger choil makes a pretty big difference in the handling of the knife. I think it's a pretty darn good knife. This is one knife that I would not buy online unless I were buying from somewhere that had a very good return policy. And it's not that the knives are bad or that Spyderco's quality control is bad. It's just that the warranty is only 1 year and you have all those hoops you have to jump through to use it, plus the money to send it back. So, unless you're dealing with someone like Amazon, which makes returns fairly easy, I would not buy it online. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Hit me up on those social media links down in the description. And be sure to hit that like, share, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.